We're going to start with the panel, the morning panel. Please take a seat. Welcome everyone. My name is Marta Lidia Chuy. I am Maya Kaqchikel from Guatemala. I'm a mother, I'm a sister, I'm an educator. I love languages, animals, and I love Mother Earth. It is a pleasure to be here today and with these wonderful people and to celebrate this day. Just having this day means a lot to all the Mayan communities, indigenous communities around the world, and this is just a huge celebration for us, for our families, for our communities. Sekar bach ala chibonoje, no bi Marta Lidia Chuy, y be Chushimulef. Muy buenos días a todos los hermanos indígenas, guatemaltecos, de todas partes del mundo, de América. Vamos a empezar con el panel número 1. Primero nos vamos a presentar los moderadores. Es un placer estar con ustedes y celebrar, conmemorar este día. Y paso a mi compañero.
Thank you, Marta Lidia. Osio Osdesanalaid, Brandon Cobb Dawadoa. My name is Brandon Cobb. I'm a citizen of the Cherokee Nation. And I currently work for the Nature Conservancy as our Indigenous Conservation Specialist. So Marta Lidia and I are going to help kind of moderate and just facilitate a conversation. We heard from Dr. Campos this morning, incredibly powerful words, an incredibly powerful story. And so I'm sure there are lots of folks who are just having tons of questions and thoughts and reactions. And that's our job, is to help facilitate that. So we have a wonderful panel here. And Marta Lidia and I will kind of just be walking around the room. So if you have a question, please feel free to raise your hand. And we'll have a couple mics going around. And we'll kind of keep a mental list of who's in line and those sorts of things. But this is a great opportunity to ask questions from the morning keynote. And then also kind of anything related to that in terms of doctrine of discovery, indigenous tradeways, or climate change as well.
Mi compañero Brandon, él es Cherokee y él estaba explicando un poquito sobre la metodología del panel. Entonces vamos a tener a los cuatro panelistas. Ellos se van a presentar, pero posteriormente se va a abrir un espacio para hacer preguntas y vamos a tomar nota mentalmente de quienes están levantando la mano y hacer preguntas. Esa será la dinámica del panel de la mañana.
Great. So at this point, if there are questions from this morning, please just raise your hand. Or it can be thoughts as well. It doesn't have to be questions. It can be reflections as well. Yes. And then, oh, yes, absolutely. I'm sorry. Thank you. I forgot about that. So we do have this wonderful panel. I'd encourage them, please, just to introduce yourself, whether that's in your own language or in English, so everybody kind of knows the group we have
here. Sure. Greetings, my kin and my people. I'm from the Nanisht Ejit clan of the Dine Nation. We're also incorrectly known as Navajo. My father's mother is of the Southern Cheyenne clan. My mother's father's of the Salt clan. My father's father's of the White People clan. And, actually Scottish and Scandinavian. So all those rivers make me. But my first clan is Nanisht Ejit, which comes from my mother. We get our last names from our mothers, not from our fathers. So that's my primary clan as a matrilineal people. I'm a musician, a scholar, and a community organizer. Thank you.
Hello. Hello. Is this on? It's on. Okay, thank you. Okay. Hello. Aha. Minye Missty Slater Iganyaki. My name is Missty Slater. I am a proud member, and I'm also chief of staff for the Iowa Tribe of Kansas and Nebraska. And I am so pleased and humbled to be a part of this incredible panel and to be in the room with you all today, so thank you all. I have come to my tribe after about 15 years of experience working in government relations, community organizing, and food system organizing as well. And the Iowa tribe is actively working to reinvigorate our ancient trade routes through a number of initiatives, including our economic development plan, which is a holistic plan that truly is about investing in the economic development that best meets our tribal values and our community values. And we're also doing a foreign trade zone. We're working on a logistics and trade hub, which is going to be located where the states that are known as Kansas, Nebraska, and Missouri all meet. And we're really looking at using this platform, using this trade hub, and using the foreign trade zone to increase indigenous to indigenous trade globally.
Peace and blessings. How on the children to do? The Queen Quet head from the body of the Gullah Geechee Nation and thing like that. We the day in the Atlantic Ocean and thing like that. So far from day this your day. And so glad for bring greeting and thing like that from we who did it in the islands and the sea. Because Sabo, Yamasi, Adisto, the part of my family and thing like that. Don't study about how I look this your day. And so in spite of how I might look now, I am from indigenous ancestry here as well as from the motherland. So the Adisto, the Cree, the Yamasi, the Kusabo are in my family line on the Sea Islands from Jacksonville, North Carolina to Jacksonville, Florida. And I'm honored to be invited to such a summit because more often than not, just because people reflect in the manner that my skin does, people somehow neglect the fact that we too are indigenous to this land called Turtle Island. And that it wasn't only those brought over in the belly of the beast that landed here that caused me to look as I look. And so I'm thankful for this opportunity to be here to share with you the work that I do as the Chieftess and head of state for the Gullah Geechee Nation, which exists from Jacksonville, North Carolina to Jacksonville, Florida, and 30 to 35 miles inland to the St. Johns River. So where many of you would have heard of the Seminole or Afro-Seminole, they are actually native Gullah Geechees that then migrated to various parts of the world, the Bahamas, as well as they're called Muskogo in Mexico. They are in Texas. We are called American in Trinidad, Tobago. All right, these are still part of the Gullah Geechee diaspora, which was also connected to the African diaspora. And so, thank you to all the Hona children for inviting me here this day and things like that. I'm ready for crack my teeth with all the Hona children. Thank you.
And again, my name is Darshan Elena Campos. In English, I'm usually known as Darshan. In communities that speak Spanish, I'm usually known as Elena, which can be confusing because I answer to both names. One thing I did not have a chance to share that I want to share here is that I am formally working with public housing in Puerto Rico, formally working with them to expand the seed gardens, to open a seed school. And it won't just be where I live, at Residencial Santa Rita de Casia in Cabo Rojo. It will also be in 32 other public housing complexes on the island. Thank you.
So please, we have the honor of having 4 amazing folks up on the stage here. And this is a great way to continue the conversation from this morning, share reflections, or even ask questions to our other panelists. So please, if you have a question or a comment or a reflection from this morning, please just raise your hand and Marta, Lydia, and I will be kind of just walking around and with the microphones.
Hello. Got a question about the Dawes Act. Whereas traditionally property was in the women's line, can you guys speak to how, with the Dawes Act, how that placed it outside of women's control?
Well, from what I understand, the Dawes Act was a way to turn communal indigenous landholdings into private property by allotting a huge swath of land that indigenous peoples would care for together and saying, okay, each male family head, each father, is going to get some odd acres. So they have all these allottees, right? Allotments. And so it's actually recorded in the history of the boarding schools. If you look at the newspapers that would come out of the boarding schools, or you look at some of the official documents of the folks who created the boarding schools, they're constantly complaining about how Native people are so generous and how they don't want to keep anything for themselves. I swear to God, I've read these documents that these officials say, we must teach the Indian to keep for himself. I swear to God, they say this over and over again. I took a wonderful class with Dr. Sims of Acoma Pueblo at University of New Mexico, and it was all about the history of boarding schools. And it was fascinating because in 2023, you never think someone would do that. But back then, they really were trying to mold us into things they wanted us to be, almost as if we were just like dolls, that they wanted us to do things. And so the Dawes Act was meant to break up these communal land holdings into private land holdings. And so to your point, these communal land holdings, at least from a Dine perspective, right, there's 573 distinct federally recognized Native nations in the USA alone, and then there's 200 more or so that are not federally recognized. So everyone has their own way of doing things, and there are some patriarchal tribes. I know of like 2 out of those 500. There's not very many, but they do exist. But anyways, from a Dine perspective, the Dine women were very much looked to for leadership. You know, what do we do with the corn? What do we do with the children? Where do we move camp? You know, we had a rotational migration. It wasn't nomadic. It was very strategic. You know, we were going to certain places at certain seasons. So the mothers, if you're concerned with the vitality of the next 7 generations, you would probably want to talk to the people who are birthing the next 7 generations. So our design was very much matrifocal, putting women at the center, but not above. It wasn't matriarchal, you might argue, because we saw the men as our equals too. We were like the sun and the moon. You can't have one without the other. And we needed to walk together. And so there was never even our constellation, the Pleiades is the masculine and Cassiopeia is the feminine, and they rotate around the North Star. And so we always understood that they were equal. However, the Dine men, I have a few Dine brothers in the room today, they make no qualms about women's leadership. They're like, yeah, do it. You know, they're not threatened. They're not like, oh, wait, what are you doing as a woman? They're not threatened at all. They're like, please, women, we're proud as Dine people. The men, that's what I love about Dine men. They're proud to be a matrifocal masculine presence. They love looking to the clan mothers. They love looking to the women, and they don't feel emasculated at all. They think it's wonderful that the women are leading. And I think the Dawes Act really, not just the Dawes Act, but so many things really forced Native peoples into a state of patriarchy that was not our own.
And I want to go to those other things that you just mentioned, because we're talking about the Dawes Act, but there's something that currently many of you might hear about in the news, especially from where I'm from, which is called heirs property. But if you study heirs property, which is largely how Gullah Geechees got land in 1860s during what the U.S. called the Civil War, as we say, there should have been a big shoot and thing like that, we call them. And so while that was going on, there was what was called the Confiscation Act. Now, people who've already confiscated other people's land that wasn't theirs in the first place now decide we're going to confiscate again. And we'll confiscate this time to sell this property off, any type of property, so land or tea servings or boots or carts or mules or whatever, but we were also considered property, okay? So we will sell this in order to fund the war. So then they said, well, we're not gonna sell the human bodies, but all this other stuff can go. Well, that started up what is now referred to as heirs property. It is the communal ownership of land. If you look at a deed that goes back in my family on both sides, my grandparents on both sides, mother and father, both have these deeds that date back to 1862 that list grandfather, grandmother, then the children, then any children they raised, all of these folks, and the last word said, and their heirs. So that is a prime example of the communal nature, the balance that my community lives in, because it never said one man's name up there on that heir's property. However, to this day, we have those who want to pierce that veil of our communal living in family compounds, where we live like these tables in a circular way, where it's the eldest family member is in the center, and all their children are around, and then their grandchildren, and then their great-grandchildren, for the expanse of how much land we have. So what people are doing now is actually in academia and in law saying heirs property is bad for you to have, because they're claiming that, oh, it's now the reason that Gullah Geechees and black people in the black belt are losing land. That's not the reason. The reason is the loss of your culture as communal people. The reason is the loss of balance and living in a more natural and human way. That's what the loss is. It is because you are now dealing with the same folks, again, who have a colonizing mindset that say that this is not correct if you want to live together. And it's definitely not correct if you women are telling us how to live together. Something's wrong, we have to change it. So let's come in and find a way to, quote, pierce the veil of that type of living, that type of thing. But yet, the same academic forums are the ones coming to all of us, asking for our traditional ecological knowledge about how to live on and sustain the land, not just where we are now, but in the world. And who births the world but the women? So really, as we, there we go. And so really, as Papa, God bless the dead, would say, he said, gal, you have to go back to old landmark. So all we are doing is, in a word, sankofa, go back and fetch it. We said, honey, ain't know where honey did from, honey ain't going nowhere, honey to going. And so we are only saying, go back to what originally was the way that kept the world in balance. And so it doesn't care if this is doors, if it's heirs property, if it's whatever. If, quote unquote, man make it, my mama said man will break it. All right? And so that's the thing, is we have to be the ones to continue to center, recenter, regroup, and then what is our title for this? Rematriate, right? So we got to keep that thing.
Thank you for that question, and thank you, panelists, for your thoughtful responses. We actually have one more panelist joining us via Zoom, Chief Ronald Holloway. So we'll keep taking questions while Chief Holloway gets set up, but then once he's available on the screen, we'll do a quick introduction for him as well. And then we have a question over here.
He's here.
I have a question about seeds. So I've been thinking a lot about seeds as the source of value, power, currency, and energetically and otherwise. I guess it's more, when I say these things to you, what comes and what wisdom do you have to share? It's general, but I trust y'all.
Well, I will say this, as soon as you said seeds, I saw myself in my field on my family compound, and then I also saw a child in the womb. So as soon as you said seeds, that was what came to mind for me. And God willing, those children in the womb will be the ones that will continue the family compounds and be the seed keepers for multi-generations to come.
I'll just share, immediately when you said seeds, I thought, yes. In a patriarchal society, the control over seeds of all different forms is something that is at its core. The control over the seeds that women make and provide, but the control over the seeds that Mother Earth makes and provides as well. And this idea of seed sovereignty.
They're going to have you speak as soon as they're done with this woman. They have asked for you and they're waiting for you to set up. So now set up and they will now turn to you as soon as this course is done.
Disempower a patriarchal society, but also create support for our Mother Earth and the seeds that she provides us is critical for the next 7 generations. And then getting to a very literal translation, part of the Iowa tribe's commitment to trade, to sustainable agriculture, to creating an environment in which everyone can thrive, including our own community for generations to come, is actually creation of a seed facility. We've already got it under construction. We've already got it underway. We're tired of buying seeds.
Exactly.
Buying seeds as property.
Right.
We're tired of it. You know, I can't imagine buying seeds, something that Mother Nature so freely provides us, and we're tired of it. So we're creating our own seed facility in a very literal translation, but in a more holistic translation. It's about sovereignty of our own bodies, sovereignty of our human relatives, our non-human relatives, and everything in between.
Hello? Yes. Thank you. I want to tell you the story of some seeds in particular that called me to them. So I'm one of those people that the trees like to talk to and the plants love. So one day I was on a walk in my community and this plant called me to her.
Heaven knows that you're now on.
It turns out that this plant, which on the island of Boricua we call Elena, and in Cuba we call guacamaya, has many different names. I have some of the seeds over there. This seed in particular was used by African and Native women to control their fertility when their bodies were made into commerce. This seed has shared with me her medicine. Most of the seeds that I care for reveal themselves to me to support natural fertility, natural abortion, and they're just beautiful. Some of the seeds that you will see sprinkled over these altares, and I build what is called memory palaces. My work is so big, and it is really the work of lifetimes and many, many, many people. Many of our seeds, for example, look like arrowheads. They look like grenades. And there is something so beautiful when you touch a seed in its pod and break it open and you see something that you would never expect to be there. And that for me is the greatest thing that I have learned in becoming a seed keeper, which I am still becoming, and I will grow into until the day I die.
Thank you all. And we actually have Chief Holloway here over Zoom. So real quick, and then we'll go back to the kind of Q&A and reflections. Chief Holloway, I would encourage you to please introduce yourself and share a few words with the group. Thank you for being here.
Greetings, thank you for inviting me. My name is Ronald Yonaguska Holloway, and I am the principal blood chief of the Raritan Indians, contemporarily known as Santo in New Jersey. I'm also the Minister of International Affairs for the Federation of Aboriginal Nations of the Americas, which is an organization of first contact tribes on the eastern seaboard, the Pokanoket and the Mashapog in the north, the Caciques, a number of the Caciques from Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic, the remnants of what used to be the Delaware Nation on the eastern seaboard. My predecessor was James Lombard-Reedy, who was the spokesperson in the traditional homeland for the Delaware Nation. And our tribe is primarily a Lenape tribe with Cherokee members. The Holloways that you see on the Dawes rolls are extended family of mine. We're the Cherokee portion that left before the Trail of Tears and were taken in by the Delaware Nation, and since we're matrilineal, we married in and we became Lenape. And we were the ones that, when everybody was rounded up and moved, we split our tribe in half. Half went to the light portions of the area where the lighter skinned people were, and the rest that were darker went to where the darker skinned individuals were. We maintained our tribal integrity for the last few centuries. And I bring you the greetings, not only from the Pokanoket in the south, but in the north, but the Uchi in the south, and the remnants of the Tuscarora that are still in North Carolina. That would be us. We're happy to be here, and we look forward to an interchange of ideas.
Thank you, Chief Holloway. So now, continuing with reflections, thoughts, questions.
Thank you. I'll introduce myself as well. My name is Elena Cave, and I work in community as a birth worker and as an urban gardener. And so I work also in various nonprofits. That is honestly the bane of my existence, but we're going to get through that. We're going to get through it. We're working for autonomy, and we're going to get there one day. But what I'm finding in these realms and in these spaces is that there is a deep rift in, some would call, the white feminist lens of excommunicating men and thinking that men are also not safe people to have in communities, period, and wanting to just focus on the women. And as you were saying, the men and the women are equal, and we need to find ways to coexist together. So basically my question is, how can we restructure and heal this relationship that lots of Black and brown people specifically have with the men in our community, so that we can work to build better communities and not tear each other down? Because I'm finding that a difficult space to navigate right now. So, yeah.
I think I think there's a reason that when White Buffalo Calf Woman came to the ancestors of the Oceti Sakowin, the Lakota, Nakota, Dakota people, I think there's a very important reason why she brought them the pipe, which is in and of itself a representation of a sacred and healthy union of the masculine and feminine. The red stone bowl is the feminine, and the wooden stem is the masculine, symbolically speaking. And I find it so fascinating that when the people were in disrepair, when they were in famine, when they were in suffering, that she didn't give them an economic strategy plan. She didn't give them psychological counseling. Well, she kind of did, actually, but she didn't give them, public health training. She gave them attention to the nexus between the masculine and the feminine. She said, this thing right here, that needs to be healed. That is the foundation of the healing. Of course, she taught other things too, which I'm not an expert to share, to know at all, or much less to share. But I do know the pipe is central. And I also find it interesting that in Dine philosophy, you know, we have a lot of what some might see as binaries, but I think they're not the same type of binaries as Eurocentric gender binaries. They're honoring the male reign and the female reign, yellow corn boy and white corn girl. They have this, and I didn't say either, but the Pleiades is actually, in our view, a phallus and scrotum. And the Cassiopeia, which is an M, is either breasts or a woman laying down ready to conceive. So you might say, oh, why are these people looks like seeing this stuff in the sky? But to us, it's like, no, we see the sky in ourselves. And we see that sacredness. But today, if you call someone a dick, excuse my language, it's an insult. Or you call someone the P word, it's an insult. How has our very essence become profanity? How has our very essence become an insult? When in Dine culture, if you were to call someone the D word, they'd be like, oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, I am the Pleiades. I am as sacred and beautiful as the Pleiades. Or if you call someone the P word, they'd be like, wow, whoa, thank you. Thank you. Yes, I am Cassiopeia. You know, but to fall in love with ourselves again, whether you identify as masculine or feminine or non-binary, to honor yourself. And so I think that is, it's not white feminists' fault that that's how they're trying to deal with the problem. They're trying to deal with it the best they can in a state of extreme trauma. We don't talk about how in Europe, even the word Europe comes from a mythological person, Europa, who was stolen by Zeus and raped. So rape is actually encoded into the word Europe. It's encoded into the identity European. But that's not, as Europeans, that's not our true name. If you go back farther, before the witch burnings, before the destruction of the feminine, the goddess cultures in Europe, you know, we were honored in a beautiful way. And we have different words for that land. Just like we need to change America to Turtle Island, we need to change Europe to something else too. But anyways, it's not their fault. They're reacting out of thousands of years of warfare and trauma. And I think the goal, as you kind of alluded to, is to fall back in love with ourselves, no matter what we're created as, to know that this is sacred. And this is as sacred as the stars, and that's who we are, each and every one of us.
I can't help but hear Tupac constantly going through my mind as a response to you, that we'll have a race of babies that hate the ladies. All right? That's all that's coming through my mind the entire time that you were speaking. And part of that has come because of the same industry he was in. So if your media is what you allow to be your God, it's no wonder you bow down to those things that make you ill and destroy you, because they're selling it. Again, like bodies are commodity, your mind is the commodity. The thing that most people in this room, probably everybody in this room has, is they call it a cell phone. I'm a computer scientist and mathematician by degrees, graduated with honors. Those are not cell phones. We used to call it PDAs because they were personal digital assistants, meaning we had finally miniaturized the computer from being the size of this room, is what the CPU was the size of when I first started computer science. Don't worry about how old I am. But this is the size that a CPU was. We said at some point we would reduce them down, and then people would carry them around. And then we could look like spies and stuff, like I can answer the phone on this on my arm now and all of this. All of that is somebody else's manifestation of what the world should be. I live in a world where we speak things into existence. Yes. So the healing that you desire, you begin to speak that. You begin to live that. You begin to walk that. And then that is what manifests in your world. That's why it is difficult for me to be in spaces where people are constantly regurgitating and I feel like puking up trauma. And we're constantly talking about what bad happened, because all you do is now exponentially multiply more of it happening. If we are looking for healing, then let us have discussions of healing. If we are looking for balance, let us have discussions of balance. If we are looking for love and joy, let us have discussions of love and joy. If we are looking for victory, there are numerous victorious stories in our world that have been manifested, especially with people that look like us. So don't buy into what others sell you about yourself. Manifest the world that you want, speak it and live it, and then we'll have the race of babies that love the ladies and love themselves too, and it'll be a better world for everybody.
And I believe we have Chief Holloway had his hands raised, so please, Chief.
Yes, I'd like to speak to that question from the Chief's perspective. I have to agree with our sisters up on the panel. I think a return to traditional values is most important. One of the things that when the Europeans came upon this continent as a plague, what they tried to do was to destroy who we were by splitting us up, putting us in Indian schools, not allowing us to be able to speak the language, moving tribes across the country, deposited in places they weren't used to. And during that time, there's been some drift by the tribes. A lot of the chiefs, if you read some of the older writings from White Eyes and some of the other chiefs, they were lamenting that after such a short period of time with contact with the Europeans, that the braves had begun to look more favorably on how the women were kept by the Europeans. And over the centuries, there's been nothing to hold out. We've been marginalized. We were involuntarily made citizens in the early 20th century. But the important thing that the tribes need to look at is, without the balance of the clan mothers and the women's circles, we're out of balance internally. And until we restore the women to their rightful place, I know in our traditions on the Eastern Seaboard, since all the Fana nations, our first contact with Europeans, we ran into them very early on. And we've suffered. We've worked very diligently out here on the East Coast to put the women back where they belong. Those of us that have an understanding of traditions understand that it's the women, and the clan mothers in particular, that can remove the chief, especially blood chiefs. There we go. And that type of balance was absolutely necessary. On the Eastern Seaboard, as our other panelist was mentioning, we have a concept of twin spirits. They weren't put out. We understood that they carried both the masculine and the feminine. And I think it is important for the women to leverage their position on the tribal councils and with the elected and appointed chiefs or the blood chiefs to ask them to return to the old ways. Because once the tribes begin to return to the old ways, then we won't argue and fight with each other. Because right now the dominant society has us fighting underneath the master's table for the scraps that they would throw down. And we need to remember that what's on the table is ours and come back together so that we can claim what's ours.
A nation can rise no higher than its women.
I want to change the question a little bit in honor of our young men and boys, because our kids in the Caribbean, and when I say the Caribbean, I mean all the Caribbean. All the Caribbean. I am Boricua because Borican called me home to her specifically. But more than all of that, I am Antillana. I am of the Caribbean. I am of the Black Caribbean. And I don't think, I know that I have failed some of our people, because it took me a long time to understand that on the island of Borican, our young boys and young men are constantly being sexually trafficked by their own families. And it is something that I have been witness to as I have lived in my community now for nearly 5 years. And So for me, as somebody who is a survivor and also a target, I realize it's because so many of our men, let's say 35 and above, are just devastated. Absolutely devastated. So, we rise up to protect them. And so for me, it meant finding the strength within the community to endure what was unendurable. Because in time, I got one of the main predators in the community fired. And that frees up our boys to sparkle like butterflies in the sunshine.
Thank you, Elena. Thank you, Queen Quet. Thank you, Missty. Thank you, Lyla. Thank you, Chief, for bringing these wonderful reflections and a conversation about balance, healing, remartration, sisterhood. And I hope everyone takes some of this reflection home for ourselves, for our families and friends, our communities, and since everyone needs some of this, and these topics are also very important and not enough spoken. So we are still welcoming questions, comments. Anyone from the audience has any questions? Thank you.
Hello, and thank you so much. I was curious, in each one of your communities, what does rematriation look like?
I'll go quick since I've blabbed quite a bit already. Rematriate. We're already matriated. No, I'm just kidding. No, okay, that's not true. That's not true. Even though we are a very matrilineal society, famously, Dine people are extremely women-centric. Our entire puppet government, the Navajo Nation, is all men, 99% men. We've never had a female president. We have our first female vice president this year. I mean, honestly, we should just not have presidents at all, but that's probably the deepest form of rematriation, is decentralizing our government again, what it used to be. But we do need to basically shove off the puppet governments that have been put on us, and many tribal nations, not all, some still are traditionally led. So I think that's the biggest part. And of course, Navajo agricultural products industry, NAPI, they use a lot of GMO corn, which is embarrassing. There's a lot of embarrassing things the Navajo Nation does. But obviously that one would be to, at the very least, our own tribal enterprises that are agriculturally based should not be GMO. They should be of our own seeds. But, you know, all industries love to extract from Navajo Nation. We're a very extractable community. So that's partly why. So yeah, but at least culturally in the home, we're still very proudly matrilineal people. But there are obviously the government agencies, and a lot of those things need to be restored. So thank you for your question.
I'll share in the tribal community, the Iowa tribe in which I'm a part of, we have not had a woman as the chair of the executive committee, which is our current government structure. And we haven't in the past had female chiefs either. But we recognize the importance and the role of women in helping create good, strong leadership. So it's truly about kind of deconstructing and decolonizing the way we talk about the role of women in leadership within our tribe. We are making active efforts to deconstruct that, to talk about that, and to create leadership paths, both elected leadership paths and non-elected leadership paths. So we are taking active steps I think, I might be a case study for that as the first chief of staff for the tribe, and of course being a female. I'm serving as an advisor. I do the research. I collect the data. I collect the information. I collect the feedback, and I give it to our elected leaders for them to make those decisions. And that is one step towards that sort of rematriation, which is actually just returning a little bit more every day to our historical way in which we governed, in which we led, and in which we discussed things.
Well, interestingly enough, you're looking at the rematriation right here, because I'm the first elected, as we say, head from the body of the Gullah Geechee Nation. I'm the first head of state the Gullah Geechee Nation ever had in world history. So, of course, that threw a lot of brothers off in 2000 when I was installed, and some of them, behind my back, said to people, well, why did we get a woman? What? If we gonna have a chief, why did we get a woman? Now, like I said, it was behind my back, so, people came to me with the gossip and told me exactly who said what. I said, well, I hope when I see them, they'll ask me this question to my face. They didn't. But interestingly enough, about 5 years into my position, I was listening to the radio going between 2 counties on the South Carolina coast. And this particular radio station was Gullah Geechee owned, and they used to do a lot of wonderful talk, great music, of course, but a lot of talk to let us know the politics that would be impacting our communities. And they were on, actually, for Martin Luther King Day, and talking about these had been civil rights leaders, these brothers. And I called into the station to thank several of them, because they were my elders, for what they had done and for the courage they had had during that era of time. And they said, hold on, as soon as they picked up, and I said, well, how want our children to do today? They said, wait, hold on. That's Queen Quet? Is that a Queen Quet? And I was like, yeah, to me. And they were like, what? So they were like, hold on, what? First, they gave all these accolades. And then I said, well, I only called not with a question. I just wanted to give you all your due respect, and I appreciate the courage that you had for you to do what you did. Even these stories you're talking about with traveling with your gun on the seat as you went meeting to meeting. You didn't have to do it, but you did. They said, hold it, Queen. We, talking about we had courage? No, you have courage. They said, because we never thought that what you have accomplished for our people could ever be done. When we heard you was going around here talking about being Gullah Geechee and throwing them down like, oh, this ain't been like I was speaking in this way. They said, we didn't think people were going to listen. We didn't think this could happen. And we have our own nation. They said, if anybody has some courage, you have it. And we honor you, and we appreciate you. And I said, well, thank you. And I said, thank God for that. Because they had no idea that I heard about the conversation they had behind my back. But they had now watched why God had ordained a woman to lead the nation and to bring us back to who we are before people destroyed us. And so when you said that question, I'm sitting here at first and I'm going, my answer is her answer. We don't need to rematriate. Our community always has been like we are, kind of imbalanced. But then the Spirit said, no, Miss, hey, you are the rematriation. Because before that, they always looked to men to be elected in some position. And instead, your position that you're elected into is above all of those governors, those mayors, those county councilmen, and all of them. And that is what was meant to be for a time such as this. And so this is what it looks like. Just take a good look. Take a picture.
I take a picture. So sadly, I have a lot of really terrible information about some very powerful white Boricua women who have revealed themselves to me to be dangerous to visibly black and brown people. And I don't know what to do with some of that information, but I am happy to share it. So you want to see a screenshot of what the supposed most famous ethnobotanist has to say about our visibly black and brown grandmothers? I am happy to play you her recording. I am happy to share screenshots from a supposed revolutionary who revealed themselves to me to not only be a sexual predator. Evidence, so much evidence. And so, rematriation to me looks a lot like being Harriet Tubman. It looks a lot like me going in where sadly Queen Quet cannot get herself. So there's somebody like me, a bloodhound, who will go in, blow down the door, and say, welcome. Here's the mic. Take a picture, not of me. I'm a distraction. I look like candy.
Trojan horse.
Exactly. Trojan horse.
Yep.
Democracy was founded on 3 main pillars: slavery, private property, and militarism. Is there any question we are where we are now?
And Chief Holloway, please.
I'd like to again address, and I don't want to speak for, because it's not appropriate for me to speak for the chiefs of all the nations, but I can tell you what we've done to facilitate rematriation. I've been chief about 15 years, and one of the first things I did was write a constitution for the Raritan, the sandstone. And in that constitution, which we've not found anything like it on the eastern seaboard, I made it legal and in the constitution with a unanimous vote of the Council of Clan Mothers that women can serve on council, women can serve as blood chiefs, women can serve as red chiefs. We put a policy in where if women were abused or beaten, men could be stripped of their citizenship. We put another policy in where anybody that qualifies, anybody that abuses a twin spirit or a woman or a child and diminishes them in any way, they can be removed from the tribe. And they are now entitled to be able to be voted into any position. Then we took our constitution and exported it to FANA. FANA adopted it unanimously, and now FANA, which is our federation, has been working with some individuals at the United Nations, and we are retooling our entire master constitution, which all of the nations hang their constitutions on, to make sure that the women's circle, the clan mothers, and all of the necessary women's bodies are reported and reinstituted throughout the eastern seaboard and the Caribbean where FANA holds sway. And I think that's the kind of decisive work that chiefs that are in positions now or when the councils are looking for chiefs to succeed those that are here have to be looking at. Because without us returning to who we are and our traditional beliefs that the women being where they're supposed to be and put right back in having a say, we're doomed to look just like the dominant society. So we're actively here at least writing into constitutions guarantees for women to be able to be chief, to be able to be red chief, to sit on council, to have any spot whatsoever that exists with any of the tribes within FANA and especially within ours. And I think it's that type of forward thinking that the chiefs that are coming up have to really take a look at. Because we've suffered greatly over the last few centuries by giving the nod to Western society's placement of women. Women are not things to be Googled at, they're not things to be bought and sold. They are valuable members, and only a woman can give life. And therefore, that perspective, when you look at the traditions, that is why the women carried everything, because it was understood that the men would go out hunting and the bear might get them, and the women had to carry everything on. That's why they're trusted. Who else has the best perspective to be able to give counsel? Because when women give counsel, they're not looking at, do we go to war right now? They're looking at how does this affect us 7 generations out. That's right. Men suffer sometimes from an excess of testosterone, and it's the estrogen that, it's true, it's the estrogen that balances out. Without that voice, without that solid backing and vote, we're condemned to continue on doing what we've done in the past. So, this is at least the perspective of the tribes of Fana on the eastern seaboard. We would be beside ourselves if we all saw other tribes begin to move back to a more traditional base. And then the tribes can come back together instead of being split apart and together. As Sitting Bull said, you can have one finger or you can close it, you can have a fist. I think we have a fist when the women are involved, and we only have a finger when it's only the men.
I like that one. Could I add, he said bought and sold. Chief, when you just said bought and sold, it also made me think of the fact that we have to be strong enough to realize that our sacred cultures are not to be bought and sold either. So I just wanted to add that because that came to my spirit, because there are so many people who are not of our clans, not of our cultures, that want to buy their way in because they think it's trite, or they think it's quaint, or they think it's trending to be indigenous. They think it's trending until they have to deal with the suffering and the fight and the rebuilding and the rematriation and all of that. But if they had to deal with all of that, then they wouldn't want in. They just want our tribal clothing, our traditional dance, our traditional foods. And if they can package it and sell it back to us, they will re-season it, redesign it in some format, and then sell it back to our children's children's children. So we can't allow the buying and selling of our sacred cultures either. That came to me as you were speaking. So thank you for what you shared.
Very quickly, I want to add in, there's a reason why we talk about trade and the tradeways. Or to quote Clan Mother in the making, Sheila Barefoot, Indigenous economic allyship. What we're talking about is a holistic way of living in the world that involves direct exchange, honor, respect, and value creation through our relationships.
Good day, it's an honor and a privilege to be here. Buiti Binafi. I am Garifuna, people who were never enslaved. According to the United Nations, in 2001, we were declared masterpiece culture for humanity. In this, I want to congratulate the organizers of this sacred gathering. In Garifuna, we would call this space the Dabuyeba. The Dabuyeba is our, like our temple, our church. And in it, we present the good, the bad, and the ugly. And as I am noted as ambassador at large for the Garifuna Nation, and this was not given to me by any colonial structure or entity. It came to me through being in the healing spaces of the Garifuna and Maya people of Belize, where I sat and listened for an entire year for guidance from ancestors and the divine. So when we are speaking about engagement, involvement of women, I want to give thanks. and speak more from an indigenous perspective than from the definitions of the other world. From the time I was 4, my grandmother told me who I am and who I am supposed to be. And she lives and breathes through me. And as a result of being obedient to the calling, responding to the call, this is about call, and this is about response. It's not about man, woman, or whatever. At least that's how I was brought up. So as Garifuna, the reason why we were declared masterpiece culture for humanity is because those structures cannot understand how, in spite of the genocide and all of that, we are here, we have our language, we have our customs, we have our way of being. So much so that one of the narratives is that the Garifuna came for enslavement in the island of St. Vincent, but we call St. Vincent Yurume. Yurume now has a hero who is our national chief and sovereign king, Chatouye. The only hero for St. Vincent is a Garifuna. And in our history, and I won't go into too much except to say that when the men didn't do what they were supposed to do, we the women, my ancestors told the men, listen, if you're not going to do right, we the women, give us the pants, let us put it on, and we're going to do the job. So I've always, through our history, we've been taught as little girls the power of women. In Dominica, we call it Kalinago. I won't go into the history of who we are as Garifuna, but just to say that we were embraced by the people who were here before Columbus and those characters. And the Kalinago and different names, titles are given to us, labels. They don't mean anything to me. It's a spirit that's important, no?
Absolutely.
The womb of the woman is a symbol for the Kalinago people in Dominica. And everybody wears that proudly. Now fast forward to know my experience in Belize. It has to do with spirit. It has to do with heart. Yes. When you meet me and I meet you, you know who I am and I know who you are before I even open my mouth.
That's right.
And so my experience has been with the Maya in Garifuna. You make lemonade out of lemons. Huh? The colonizers, the Catholic Church, decided that they could not send white missionaries to the Garifuna people to minister to us. So what they did was to send, and I will stand up for this, African American women from New Orleans to minister to the Garifuna people. Those women were enslaved when they arrived in Belize because they couldn't send white people to us as missionaries. The lemonade that was made from that was that we were used by the Catholic Church to be missionaries all over the country. So what that means is that we develop a powerful relationship with the Maya people of Belize. And so I want to invite us, to encourage us to identify the assets that we have, who we are. And my ancestral husband, Harriet Topsy, the head of hundreds of Maya pyramids in Belize, he transitioned. He went to the ancestors in 1995. My husband, who is one of the few people of color archaeologists in these here Americas, lives through my children, 5 children and 17 grandchildren and counting. I had to find out who my husband was in the Belize, not only Belize, but in the whole world. So this conversation is very powerful for me and my children. As a result, I learned how to be quiet, how to listen as a woman, as leaders, Maya leaders all over Belize, called me and asked me to help them to organize themselves. Me, a Garifuna woman, sat with alcaldes and chiefs in Maya communities. So when we have this conversation, sisters and brothers, let us identify our assets.
Yes.
One of the assets is what was meant for bad turns out for good.
Yes.
And let us embrace that.
Yes.
So I was reminded the other day when I spoke with the mayor of a Garifuna community, Robert Mariano, I'll call his name. He said to me, When I spoke with the men, I proposed to them that you be the paramount chief of the Garifuna people. Why? The spirit is the power of who we are and who we can be.
Yes.
People from all over Belize, Maya, Mestizo, Garifuna, call and ask me to help them. I just left Belize and did rituals, not just with Maya, but with Garifuna. And the Maya people, in fact, when I go with my brother here, Narciso, Dr. Narciso Torres, that's another story. I don't even remember that I am Garifuna.
Right.
I honestly do not. I don't even remember that I am a woman. I honestly do not. I feel a oneness, and that is what I would like us to search for. Because when I went to the United Nations many years ago, when they were organizing with women, and I could not understand what the women of the United States were talking about. When I entered into the United Nations, I never saw one single African American woman in leadership. So I went and I looked for them. I never saw one indigenous woman in leadership at these women's conference. So I went to look for them. So I'm calling us forth to go and look, go and search, to go and listen to what we are called to be. And when we listen and we move from a space of power, of the treasures of who we are and the treasures of what we have, we already sorted out, and we are developing a legacy for our children and our grandchildren. I am here because of my children and because of my grandchildren. And I want to be able to tell my Maya, East Indian, Garifuna, Creole children, all embodied in my grandchildren, what their grandmother did on their behalf for generations now and generations to come. And in the memory of my husband, after 7 years of his transition, the government of Belize called me and my children to cut the ribbon for the first museum of Belize. So, I will talk this afternoon, but to summarize, I challenge you and I challenge myself to step into the power of who we already are. Exactly. And I am going to say it is through my children that I get the inspiration. When my grandchildren are put in my arms straight out of their mother's womb, I, as a grandmother, begin to speak life into them. The boys and the girls. When my children come here to these here United States of America and go to school, I go to school with them every day to find out what is being taught to them. When my children, who are young boys living in these here United States, come to school, I go through the Catholic Church, who have the keys to go to maximum security prison, to listen and find out, how did these boys, how did these men get into this prison? And listen, we have the power to break the cycle.
Absolutely.
Now, not talk about what was done to us. We know that. We live it.
That's right.
When I go to Urume, where thousands of my people were genocided, then I know that we are having to break the cycle. And we, the women, have the power. You know why? Because the men are targeted for destruction. So we are the ones who have to stand in the gap and stop calling ourselves single parents or whatever.
Oh my goodness.
Whatever. We are a village. We are changing this language. We are changing this narrative. Not just for the United States, but for the world.
Yes, Sister. Yes. Ashe. 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 Now, my sister, I want you to know, it's not lost on me. You're talking about lemonade and look what you're wearing. Yes! Sugar cane and the lemons right there. Look what you're wearing. Okay. Yes. Yes. Come on.
Thank you very much for this wonderful conversation. And as the planning committee led by Renee Sosi, the first conversation that we had, I remember bringing the topics of renutrition, seed keepers, motherhood. It's actually, this is what we were imagining. And seeing this happening is just like a blessing, an amazing feeling. And thank you everyone for joining us today. And because we have an agenda and we have to eat.
We need to get back on it.
Yeah, we have to eat. So unless I will pass the mic to Brandon, but yeah, this will be like the first morning panel, and thank you everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, please, a big round of applause for all of our panelists here and all the folks who asked amazing questions. Just one more round of applause, please.